Welcome to Instant Deck Techs. The aim of this series is to give you a short, concise guide on how to build a certain deck. It won't cover every card, but we'll go through all the categories and go over the types of cards needed to make the deck work. Any card mentioned will be down in the description below. The commander of this deck is Veyran, Voice of Duality. It is 1 blue-red for a 2/2 legendary creature, Efreet Wizard. It has Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, Veyran gets +1/+1 until end of turn. It also has, if you casting or copying an instant or sorcery spell causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. A thing to note is that bottom ability will affect the top ability of this card. The aim of this deck is to use Veyran to double up effects that trigger when we cast instants and sorceries. As is often the case in Izzet, this deck will have a spell slinger theme. When we go through sections of the deck, there will be cards which effects are doubled by Veyran, and then obviously instants and sorceries that will trigger them. When building the deck, you want to make sure between half to 2/3 of your non-land cards are instants and sorceries, so that's around 30 to 40 cards. There's no point having all these cool effects if you have nothing to trigger them. First up is some token makers. These are always good in a spellslinger deck, and what's better in this deck is that with Veyran out, you'll make twice the normal amount of tokens. That means this deck will really snowball with one of these out. I would probably say that these are among the most important non-instant and sorcery cards in the deck. Next up is our ramp. First of these is the rocks. And again, we don't have too many spots for permanents in this deck, but having a good base of mana producers to cast our spells will be essential. Like with most decks, we want to be looking for cheap things that can ramp us out nice and early. I would generally focus on things that tap for coloured mana. Exceptions to this are the obvious Soul Ring and Thought Vessel. The reason we're playing mana rocks over instants and sorceries that make mana is that in Commander we really need to be doing this turn after turn. I would say, however, that something like Jeska's Will does have a place in this deck. As importantly, it can draw cards as well, and then something like Burgi, when combined with some of the card draw we'll get to later, will really let us have some powerful turns. On top of the ramp, you can also run some cards which make our spells cheaper. I personally wouldn't run these instead of ramp, I'd want to run them as well as our ramp package. These get better the bigger the spells you're running, so if you're running a lot of low drop spells then you won't need to run as many of these. However, if you're running some big X spells, then these are something to definitely consider. Let's move on to the card draw. First up are the options on permanents. These two are worth considering because Archmage Immeratus and Niv Mizzet Parun will have their effects doubled by our commander, so we draw 2 cards each time we cast an instant or sorcery. That is a really good rate, and as such I would want to run them in the deck. Burning Prophet, while not drawing us a card, will give us a double scry with our commander, so that does make it a solid inclusion all for just 2 mana. Next up is card draw on instants and sorceries. I would really want to run a lot of these in the deck. As with our token makers out, we can just use these to draw through our deck and make a commanding board state. On screen here are examples of card draw up and down the curve, but I would really focus on spells that cost 1 or 2 mana, so you can cast multiple spells per turn. If you're playing the creatures and spells that reduce the cost of our instants or sorceries, then you can also look at running some big X spells, as these will really help refill our hand late game. At an absolute minimum, you need 8 bits of card draw in this deck, but personally I would want to run up to 16, just so we can really get the ball going and really start churning through our deck. Moving over to our interaction, first I'll mention some permanents which work nicely with our commander. We have Relic Amulet and Weaver of Lightning. These will get triggered twice with our commander, so are something to consider. When it comes to non-permanents, however, there are plenty of options available. You can have burn, counterspells, exile effects, all in this deck, so run the best ones that you fancy. In a deck like this, more expensive interaction like Mystic Confluence and Sublime Epiphany get even better, as we wring the most value out of them that's possible. Again, these get better with the cost reduction spells, and where possible I want my targeted creature interaction to be on instants to keep our opponents always guessing. Board wipes, however, are fine at sorcery speed. Sometimes you just need to kill the whole board, and these will all do a great job of that. At a minimum, you need 8 bits of interaction in your deck, but you may need to run more depending on your meta. We can also run some recursion in this deck, as they'll basically double up the best instants and sorceries in our graveyard, with a late game overloaded Mizzic's Mastery serving as a perfectly fine win condition as well. Talking of win conditions, let's move on to some ways of winning the game. First up is Firebrand Archer, Electrostatic Field, and Gutter Snipe. With our commander in play, these will do double damage to our opponents whenever we cast an instant or sorcery, so you can see how these will quickly rack up a load of damage if you can drop one early in the game. They will very quickly become a must kill for our opponents. Next up is doubling effects. I specifically put these on permanents that they themselves get doubled by Veyran for some added fun in the deck. Squeezing these in though may be tough, but if you have room I think they'll do a great job at giving us additional value and are a load of fun. Honestly, who doesn't love Thousand Year Storm? Next up is some effects that buff our team. With the wide range of tokens that we'll be making, these will push them over the top and do that little extra bit of damage that we need to finish off our opponents. After that, there are 2 cards that work very well in a token deck, and that is Shared Animosity and Mana Echoes. One buffs up the team, and one gives us mana whenever we make a token with our commander out. These are really powerful cards, and while our token makers make all different types of tokens, they will be making us so many that the synergy with these cards still work. To really maximise them, however, we can run a wizard subtheme in the deck. A lot of the creatures we're running in the deck, including our commander, happen to be wizards, so by running cards like Mask with Nexus and Arcane Adaptation, we can turn all our tokens into wizards as well. When these are combined with Adeliz, Narumiha, Galecast Colossus, and Kaza, you have a hyper-synergistic deck that can steamroll all of our opponents. Rounding off the deck with some utility lands, I think even without the Wizards package, Riptide Laboratory is a very good include, as it will save our commander from our opponent's removal. Mystic Sanctuary gives us some extra redundancy, and then with all the card draw we're running, Reliquary Tower will mean we get to keep a full hand without having to discard down. After these, I'd look at the cycling lands, as they're very good at helping us churn through our deck to hit our token makers and our best spells. The rest of your mana base will be very dependent on what you have available to you. We've recently released a video with some advice on building a deck with a budget mana base, which might be of help. Until next time, please like, share and subscribe, and let us know down in the comments if there are any commanders you'd like to see a deck tech on. Thank you very much for watching.